I'm Peter Tabuns. I'm the Interim NDP leader, and I'm joined by my colleagues Doly Begum, our deputy leader, and Jessica Bell, NDP housing critic. We're here to discuss the NDP's legislative priorities heading into the next legislative session. Fighting for action to address the crisis in healthcare that Doug Ford has left raging, that is our top priority. As people are aware, children's intensive care units have hit capacity. Hallway medicine is back with a vengeance. Emergency departments are closing for weeks on end. I shudder to think, I worry when I think about how bad the crisis in Ontario's hospitals could get as we approach flu season. If the government keeps pouring fuel on the fire and refusing to take actions that we know can help. I'm going to invite Doly to speak to some of the solutions we're calling for. Doly? Oh, my apologies.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. As Peter has stated, today we're here to renew that commitment that we have to the people of this province, which is to stand by the side of the good people of Ontario. That means standing up for the patients who are struggling to get the health care that they need right now, which means staffing in our hospitals. We need to hire more nurses. We need to make sure that we have the healthcare workers who are able to do the job, and we respect them, we retain them by getting rid of Bill 124, by getting rid of Bill 7, and making sure that we're paying them properly and recruiting new healthcare workers who are waiting in line to be recruited, who have years of skills and experience. We need to make it easier and expedite the system to retain and recruit more internationally trained healthcare workers through different processes that we have introduced in the past, including the PRA, which is the Practice Ready Assessment process. The other things that we can do is introduce paid sick days. We can also make sure that we're actually helping our healthcare system by providing the funding that our hospitals that we need, as well as community health clinics, and making sure that we're providing the support that our long-term care and our seniors need, which means having more PSWs. The other thing I want to reiterate is our commitment to our education workers. We need to be investing in our schools, in our classrooms, not the token 200 that the government has announced, and we need to be making sure that we're bargaining in good faith so that we have good education, we have quality education, and we have the attention that's available one-on-one for the students that we have across this province. I want to now pass it on to my colleague, Jessica Bell. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doly. Thank you, Peter. I'm Jessica Bell. I'm the MPP for University Rosedale. We want to see the legislative priorities for this government to include tackling the skyrocketing increases in rent, in mortgage payments, and in food. We are calling for a doubling of social assistance rates for ODSB and OW recipients who are really struggling to get by right now. We are calling for the Ontario government to come up with a plan to stop corporations from price gouging under the guise of inflation so people can go to the supermarket and buy food they can afford. And we're also calling on this government to introduce a comprehensive housing plan to make housing affordable for renters and first-time home buyers. That plan should include real rent control, measures to clamp down on investor-led speculation, and a plan to build more homes that Ontarians will live in, as well as more affordable homes and more supportive homes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jess. Questions?
What do you want to see done about the not the offload delays from the ambulance paramedics? We're seeing all these code reds, code blacks across the province, especially in southwestern Ontario.
Well, as we've been saying, one of the first things that needs to be done is the repeal of Bill 124, the end of those wage caps for nurses, healthcare workers, paramedics, so that in fact we stop driving people out of the sector. As you're aware, this last summer it was reported the number of nurses and social workers who are in the health sector dropped by 5,000 over the year before. If Doug Ford continues on the course that he's taking, he'll continue to drive people out. He can do whatever he wants in terms of announcing recruitment. If you're driving people out, you can't actually do the staffing. So first of all, make sure that Bill 124 is gone. As my colleague has said, accelerate bringing internationally trained nurses into the healthcare system so that the people are there to actually receive the patients when they arrive in emergency rooms, and in general investment in the healthcare sector, primary care, so that people are getting care without having to come into hospitals.
On that primary care front, the government's going to be changing a bunch of their telemedicine fees on December 1st. Would you like to see an expansion of virtual care rather than this what appears to be a contraction?
To the extent that virtual care has made it possible for more people to get care more easily, I don't see why you would be contracting the service, frankly. We need the healthcare providers and we need access to those providers. It doesn't make sense, given the crisis that we have, to be reducing people's access to healthcare providers. Other questions?
You mentioned the Bill 124. I just don't know where we go. Like, you guys have been saying it for a long time, and others. The government clearly hasn't moved on that. I don't know if you have other thoughts or, what happens?
Well, if you don't deal with it, you continue to have a healthcare crisis that gets deeper and more problematic. As you probably heard, the Premier said, I'll do whatever it takes to solve this problem, except the one thing that would have a huge impact on retaining nurses and healthcare workers and bringing them back. As long as he does not move on this, I can't see how this healthcare crisis is going to be solved.
Peter, I don't know if you guys have been asked this yet already. I'm sorry I was late. This housing stuff that Steve Clark's going to introduce on Tuesday, maybe Jess wants to speak to it.
Yes, exactly.
We know some of the changes that are going to be looming, zoning changes, overriding municipal planning in outside Toronto. What are your thoughts and stuff on the conservation authorities, other things?
Jess?
Yeah, sure. We want to see the legislation and the details in it before we can comment fully. What we are calling for is the government to have a comprehensive plan to make housing affordable. That plan should include ending exclusionary zoning, a plan to build more homes to meet the needs of current and future Ontarians. It is also it must include measures to clamp down on investor-led speculation. So a first-time home buyer can buy their first home instead of a developer buying their 40th home. We also need a commitment to clamp down on escalating rent prices. Rents in Toronto in particular are at record levels. People are choosing between paying their rent or buying food. This government has shown no interest in making renting affordable for working Ontarians. They should. Those measures should include real rent control.
Now we understand that there may be some rent-to-own provisions in this legislation. I mean, is that a good step? I mean, a lot of the things that they're talking about are stuff that you guys had called for before that they wouldn't do, and now they're kind of going in a small p progressive direction. Are you encouraged by at least the signals that you're seeing?
We would want to see the legislation before we can comment. The devil is in the details. Rent-to-own programs can be a very useful solution to help people get into the housing market and buy their first home, but we would need to see the details.
What are you looking for in the upcoming fall economic statement?
That's a question for Peter.
Well, we've outlined our priorities. Reinvestment in healthcare, dealing with the healthcare crisis. You need to deal with the cost of living crisis. We think that investment in our schools, making sure that there are fair agreements with education workers, all those things should be priorities in that fall economic statement.
And given that we're seeing continuing inflation, it's possible we could see more money coming into the government coffers like we just saw. What should the government be doing with that bonus money?
Well, clearly, as we've said this past week, we have a healthcare crisis. They could be investing the windfall revenues in making sure that we have the healthcare workers in place, the nurses in place, the home care in place to look after Ontarians. And if they're not doing that, they're being negligent. They have the financial resources to do it. They should be doing it.
Doly, you mentioned the $200. I believe you were talking about the announcement yesterday. Is there, I mean, he talked about inflation there. I mean, could this be a positive that parents are going to get a little help?
Well, when we're talking about families struggling to make ends meet, 100% we need to support families. We need to make sure that, every working class family right now that needs a little bit of help, whether it's through, rent control, whether it's being able to afford their groceries, we need those support. But using education as that sort of, I think, a scapegoat and trying to, give a wink and a nudge and say, well, families are struggling and you can use that. And I think that's what the minister was probably implying yesterday. That's not the right solution. If we're talking about education, we need to invest in our classrooms. If we're talking about education workers, we're really bargaining here for the average income earner who's about, $39,000. These education workers, over 55,000 of them, are custodians, librarians, ECEs. They're the ones who are not making ends meet right now. And we need to be able to bargain in good faith and say, well, you know what, we respect the work that you do. We are able to listen to you. And who's going to suffer at the end if we don't bargain in good faith? Parents and the children. And so this is a much bigger conversation of one that's part of what we need to do to invest in our schools and our education system, and another piece, which is what we need to do, as Peter talked about, which is the rising cost of living right now.
What's your response that announcement came as they're in the middle of these difficult contract negotiations?
I think your question answers it itself, really. We've seen this government do that time and time again. And it's a way to pit parents against educators. It's a way to, show the government's intention. And I just worry that at the end of the day, it'll be our parents and students and the educators who will suffer. And we shouldn't be doing that.
You mentioned price gouging. How would that work? Like, how would you want to?
Sure. The provincial government does have the legal authority to deal with price gouging. I think they should be looking at areas where we're seeing record profits and at the same time record prices, and looking for action both to give relief to consumers but also to take those funds from those companies, those sectors that are doing very well through inflation.
Which sectors, like groceries?
Well, the grocery sector is doing very well, and people are having a tough time buying groceries. You're well aware of the price fixing actions or the price fixing prosecutions that have been undertaken in the past. This is a sector where pricing has not been favorable for consumers, and I think this provincial government should be looking into that and taking action where they can to protect consumers.
Do you think there should be some type of investigation into price gouging?
Yes, there should be, frankly. Again, the province has the ability to legally take action against gougers. I've never seen them take action, even though the Premier has talked about that. And
the toll-free number.
Oh, yes, and the toll-free number. Yes, thank you. Who could forget the toll-free number? I think they should be looking at areas where people are being hit hard and taking action against those who are making unconscionable profits. I think my colleagues talked about incredible soaring rents. When you look at the investments made by private equity firms in housing, they're not doing that because they're charities. They're doing that because they can make a fortune. And this government should be going after those who are taking advantage of the housing crisis to squeeze people.
Peter, I know you've already addressed it and it's kind of old, but I'm just wondering if I could get you in English on the Hydro-Quebec thing from like a week and a half ago.
Okay. It makes no sense to me that we would end an agreement to bring makes no sense to me that we would end an agreement that provides emission-free power to Ontario. We've already been told that there's a crunch coming. Why you would not lock in and keep locked in firm commitments for power when this is a government that's contemplating building new gas-fired power plants, which will be very expensive, which will defeat our climate needs. Why you would take that course instead of retaining the relationship with Hydro-Quebec, in fact, expanding it.
And, the OEB has authorized price hikes over the course of the year. Gas bills can be very expensive this winter. We already subsidize hydro a lot. Wondering, do you think we should further subsidize gas bills or anything to help people over the winter, or stay out of that?
Yeah, we've said there are two things the government needs to do with people's heating bills. It needs to ramp up dramatically its investment in energy conservation so that people can cut their consumption, cut their greenhouse emissions, and cut their bills. And frankly, it should be coming forward with a plan to provide subsidies to those who are struggling the most with heating bills that are going to make it very difficult for them to actually put food on the table at the same time.
What about the opioid crisis? We've seen since 2017, its deaths are up more than 100%, largely under this government. Really skyrocketed during the pandemic. What do you want to see done there?
I would say that we have argued in the past that clinics for people to self-administer under supervision so that they are not unnecessarily putting themselves at risk makes a lot of sense. As you're aware, this is a government that's cut back on the ability to set up these clinics. They're wrong. This has led to deaths. And frankly, the other part of this is you need to invest in mental health supports. People don't engage in using those drugs on a whim. Usually they're dealing with some profound problem. Investing in more mental health supports would help reduce the rate of addiction and thus the rate of death. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, if you have a question, please press star 1. Your first question on the phone comes from Jeff Gray with Globe and Mail. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to ask, going back to the housing bill, there's a whole bunch of things floating around and have been reported. One of them is the idea that the bill will restrict or completely eliminate the ability of third parties, so residents groups, environmentalists, even other developers, from challenging anything at the what we now call the Ontario Land Tribunal. Is that a concern for you?
We want to see the details of the legislation before we can comment fully. We have long called for reform to the Lands Tribunal to ensure that affordable housing goals are met, but that municipalities and residents also have a fair say. That is our position on that.
And to follow up on that, just the other piece that people have seized on, one of the recommendations from that panel that the government has committed to but not actually enacted, and it's not clear to me they're going to actually do it on Tuesday either, is this, you mentioned exclusionary zoning. The way that's been laid out is to allow as of right anywhere, I believe, 6 units, 4 stories. Is that something? Is that your understanding of that? Is that what you'd like to see? That particular policy?
Our party, the Ontario NDP, has put forward a comprehensive housing plan that includes moving forward on ending exclusionary zoning, and that must be twinned with a plan to build more affordable housing, as well as measures to clamp down on speculation and bring in real rent control. We need a comprehensive approach to make housing affordable for current Ontarians as well as new Ontarians that are planning on calling our province home.
Your next question comes from Colin DeMello with Global News. Please go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Peter, there seems to be a lot of talk about a recession on the horizon. I'm wondering what you think the fall economic statement needs to focus on, or if there needs to be any kind of cushion or support payments to people if there is indeed a recession.
It's a good question, Colin. I think that we've outlined what our priorities are for this immediate session. We have in the past said that if you're going to actually increase employment in Ontario, engaging in a very large-scale climate plan, large-scale energy conservation, development of renewables, would actually help Ontario weather a recession, a downturn in employment. And I think if this government committed to taking action on climate, it could create a lot of jobs and make it much easier for people in Ontario to get through any recession. Having said that, I'll also note that Ontario Works and ODSP payments need to be doubled because if more people do find themselves needing that kind of support, they will find themselves in desperate situations if the government has not actually increased those support payments.
Thank you. And just on the municipal election coming up, we all know that the former leader of the NDP is running for the mayor of Hamilton. Is the Ontario NDP endorsing Andrea Horwath at all as the next mayor of Hamilton?
We actually haven't had any discussion about any formal endorsements, but frankly, I think just about every New Democrat in Ontario is endorsing Andrea to be the new mayor of Hamilton.
Is that so she won't come back here?
Oh, come on, Rob.
Just throwing that out.
You guys are so mischievous some days. No, we want her to be successful. She did a lot of good work here. She'll do good work as the mayor of Hamilton. We hope that she's successful.
She'll get strong mayor powers.
Possibly. Other questions? No more mischief.
I think that may be it on the phone line. So, thanks,
Okay.
folks.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.